The last bit of Unit 2, so the last bit about solving with decimals. This is section 5.9 in your textbook, so we're kind of skipping around here. 5.9 is solving equations containing decimals. And again, the way the textbook is going to teach you how to do this is not the way I'm going to show you how to do this. So it's going to be very different than the way the textbook explains it. The way I'm going to teach you is what's going to help you when you get to 0308. So our goal here, just like fractions, is to eliminate the decimals. That's to me, the most consistent way to solve these, and then when you get to 0308, that's generally how the instructor teaches how to solve with decimals. So step 1 is going to be make all terms integers by multiplying by 10, 100, or 1,000, depending on the maximum number of decimal places. And I'll show you what that looks like. So it's depending on the maximum number of decimal places. There's a couple notes for that. Note 1 is that all terms on both sides of the equation must multiply by the same value. And my students in 0308 tend to mess that part up. All terms on both sides of the equation must multiply by the same value. And I'll show you how to do that so when you get to 0308 you won't mess that up. Note 2 is that any terms inside parentheses do not change. We won't see that in this class, you'll see that in 0308. But any terms inside parentheses are protected and do not change. So note 2 is really for your next course. So step 1 is the big one. Make all terms integers by multiplying by 10, 100, or 1,000, depending on the maximum number of decimal places. And I'll show you how that looks. Step 2 is to rewrite the equation with the new values. Not a big deal. Step 3, solve the equation using the steps from chapter 2, which was solving with integers. So same procedure as solving with integers. So I want to explain this 10, 100, or 1,000. You might already be familiar with this, but just in case you're not familiar, I want to go through this. So the question is, where is this 10, 100, or 1,000 coming from? Why are we doing that? So multiplying by 10 moves the decimal place over one spot to the right. One spot to the right. So if I had 1.2 and I multiplied by 10, what that's going to do is move that decimal place over here, and it's going to become 12. So I'm moving the decimal point one place by multiplying by 10. Dividing does the opposite. It moves it to the left, but we'll get there in just a second. Multiplying by 100 moves the decimal place over two spots to the right. So if I had 1.23, I would move, and multiplied by 100, I would move it two spots, and it would become 123. So multiplying by 100 moves the decimal place over two spots to the right. And dividing does the opposite, it moves it to the left. Multiplying by 1,000 moves the decimal point over three spots to the right. So if I had 1.234 multiplied by 1,000, I'd move it over 1, 2, 3 times, and it would become 1,234. So the number of zeros determine the number of spots. 10 has 1 0, 1 spot. 100 has 2 zeros, 2 spots. 1,000 has 3 zeros, 3 spots. Multiplying makes it bigger, so it moves the decimal point to the right. Dividing does the same thing to the left, making the number smaller. So we'll practice both of these. Again, the book talks about this back when we did operations with decimals, but I really didn't bring it up because it really wasn't important then, but it's very important now, and that's how we change decimals into integers to help us solve. So we're going to go through a few examples. If you want some scratch paper, go ahead and pause the video and get some out. You might need some. Remember, we're not using the calculator, so we're going to have to work all of these out by hand. So it's good to have some scratch paper handy just in case there's some things to work out by hand. So let's look at some of these examples. We have W plus 2.9 equals negative 0.6. The first thing you want to do is count how many decimal places we have. None here. We have one here and one here. So 1 and 1. We're looking for the maximum number of decimal places, which in this example is just 1. So because it's just one decimal place, we're going to multiply by 10 to move the decimal point. So we're going to multiply the first one by 10, the second one by 10, and over here by 10. Notice I wrote it 3 times because there are 3 terms. So 1, 2, 3. It seems a little silly to write it all 3 times, but this is where my 0308 students mess up. Every single term gets multiplied by the same number on both sides of the equal sign. Very, very important for this to work. That gives us 10W plus the 2.9 is going to become 29 equals, the negative is going to stay negative, the 0.6, if we move this over one time, is just going to become 6. So you have to work this very slowly and carefully and not rush through it. Now 10W plus 29 equals negative 6 is all integers, and we can now use our skills from earlier with solving with integers. So we have a variable, a constant equals a constant. We're going to move the 29 using subtraction. That gives us 10W. Those are gone. Negative 6 minus 29, we can keep change. We should get negative 35. And then divide by 10, divide by 10. W equals, now negative 35 divided by 10. What's going to happen? The decimal's over here, all the way to the right for 35. Dividing by 10 is going to move it one spot, instead of to the right, to the left. So if we move that one spot to the left, that becomes negative 3.5. And that is your answer. W equals negative 3.5. Alright, if you need to pause and re-watch that, you can go back and watch it again. I'll do a few more. As you get used to this, pause the video and try for yourself. Let's look at the next one. We have 7 equals negative 4.3 times x. The 7 doesn't have a decimal. 4.3 has 1, and the x doesn't have a decimal. We've got one decimal place. So one decimal place, we're going to multiply by 10, and all terms on both sides will multiply by the same value. Again, this is where my 0308 students mess up. Multiply by 10, multiply by 10, multiply by 10, every single one of them. That's going to give me 70 equals, the one decimal point will move to the right to make negative 43 plus 10x. 70 equals negative 43 plus 10x. Now we're going to do the opposite operation and add 43 to both sides. Add 43, let's see, that makes 113 equals 10x. Now we're going to divide by 10. What that does, whoops, that should be an x, The decimal's over here. Dividing by 10 moves it one time to the left, so my answer is 11.3. And let me write that better. X equals 11.3. So really take your time through these. Make sure that initial step is set up correctly. I want to see you write your number, whatever you're multiplying by, under every single term so you don't forget. If you want to pause and try the next one, that's fine. If you'd like to watch me again, that's fine too. 8.1 equals H plus 9. We have one decimal point. So we're going to multiply by 10, multiply by 10, multiply by 10. That's going to give us 81 equals 10H plus 90. 81 equals 10H plus 90. Now we're just going to solve by subtracting 90 from both sides. Positive 81 minus 90 is negative 9 equals 10H. Divide by 10, divide by 10. Again, the decimal is originally over there. It moves it one spot to the left. So H equals negative 0.9. You don't need to put the 0. The computer loves the 0. Negative 0.9. I just like 0.9. The computer should take it either way. The technically correct way to write it is with the 0 in front. Negative 0.9. To make it very clear that there's not a whole number, it's just 0.9. So if you need to review those three again, feel free to. If not, we're going to move on to the problems on the back. Just using the same technique over and over and over again. Let's see. So we have negative 0.07 plus y equals 0. This time we have two decimal places, if you can see them. 1, 2. So instead of multiplying by 10, we want it to move two spots to the right, so we're going to multiply by 100. So this one's going to multiply by 100. The y is multiplied by 100. The 0 is multiplied by 100. Every single term. So this becomes negative 7 plus 100y. Now normally we'd actually multiply this, but 0 times 100 is still 0. And then we have negative 7 plus 100y equals 0. We're going to add 7 to both sides. We get 100y equals 0 plus 7, which is 7. We're going to divide by 100. This time when we divide by 100, instead of moving over one time, it will move over two times to the left. So my decimal always starts to the right. 1, 2. So we're going to have to put a 0 in front. So it's 0.07. We put the 0.07 is the same thing. I get lazy and drop off that leading 0, but technically you want to keep that on there. 0.07. On the next one, we have C minus 6.8 equals negative 4.8. Here's a decimal and a decimal, one place. We're going to multiply by 10. Multiply by 10, multiply by 10. That gives us 10c minus 68 equals negative 48. From there, we're going to add 68 to both sides using our solving skills. That gives me 10c equals 20. So negative 48 plus 68 is positive 20. Divide by 10, divide by 10. These are all nice numbers, so 20 divided by 10 is positive 2. C equals positive 2. Again, if you want to pause the video and try the next one, you can. If not, we can go through it together. Negative 3y equals negative 0.63. So we have 2 decimal places here. So we're going to multiply this term by 100 and this term by 100. That's going to give us negative 300y equals negative 63. Divide by negative 300. I know that looks a little scary. Y equals, we know we have a negative divided by a negative, so our answer is going to be positive. You're going to have to either work down here or work on your scratch paper. I'll work on my scratch paper. The bottom number goes on the outside, the top number goes on the inside. Now we have our decimal point, and we're going to put it straight above. We're going to add a couple zeros to help us out. We know there's going to be a 0 in front because 300 does not go into 63. So we're going to think 300 going into 630, kind of ignoring the decimal point. 300 goes into 630 2 times. 2 times 300 is 600. We will subtract. That makes 30 left over and bring down a 0. 300 goes into 300 exactly 1 time. So the answer is positive 0.21. If you struggle with the division, just practice. There will be some problems that you'll have to divide by hand. We will not have our calculators for this exam or this quiz. So please make sure you practice your division and you can work that out by hand. I know it's tempting to use your phone or your calculator on your homework, and there's a few that you can, but for the most part we want to work these out 100% by hand. Alright, let's keep going. If you want to pause and try the next one, you can. This one's really big numbers, I'll just warn you now. I try not to get the numbers this big, but just in case they do get this big, you'll just have to do your very best. So let's look at this one. There's 2 decimal places. That means we need to multiply by 100. So 2.25 times 100 is 225R. Negative 18 times 100 is negative 1800. So we add 2 zeros. If there's 2 zeros here, we add 2 zeros there. From there we have to divide by 225. And again, that's kind of big numbers there. R equals, we're going to have to come to our scratch paper, 225 on the outside, 1800 on the inside. We know it's a negative divided by a positive, so my answer is going to be negative. I always put the sign first so I don't forget about it later. The decimal point is here. We need to think how many times does 225 go into 1800, and this is really just a guessing game. You can guess any number. Let's see if I guess. I'm going to guess 5 and see how I did. We'll just have to multiply it out. We got 1125. So I know I can put it in a couple more times. So let's try 7. You just kind of have to guess it out, and I know this is a lot of scratch work. It's very tempting to use your calculator. But sometimes the numbers are going to get big, and we just have to keep trying. So 7 times gives me 1575. I think I can try 8. So 225 times 8. What I'm doing is I'm guessing a number and multiplying it out to see what I got. First time I got 1125, I can go bigger. So I tried 7, got 1575, I can go bigger. So now I'm going to try 8. 225 times 8. Multiply it out. 8 times 2 is 16 plus 4 is 20. 8 times 2 again is 16 plus 2 is 18. You just keep guessing. I ended up guessing 8, which is exactly 1800. Now I try not to let the numbers get that big, but on your homework there are a couple where the numbers get pretty large. That one should have been negative 8. That's as bad as it gets when you have to kind of guess around to get the division. Other than that, the numbers will stay relatively small. Alright, let's look at the next one. 1.5 equals 0.5n. 1 decimal point here, 1 decimal place here. We'll multiply by 10. Multiply by 10. That gives me 15 equals 5n. Divide by 5, divide by 5. 15 divided by 15 divided by 5 is 3. So that one worked out pretty easy. So sometimes they're pretty easy, sometimes it takes a little bit of guesswork until you can get the exact division correct. The next one, we have 0.8p equals negative 96. One decimal place, we'll multiply by 10. If you're getting the hang of this, you can pause and try on your own. If you need to watch these again, that's fine too. We have 8p equals negative 960. Divide both sides by 8. And again, we're going to have to work this out either off to the side or on your scratch paper. I like to do this on my scratch paper. 8 on the outside. I have a negative divided by a positive, so I know my answer is going to be negative 960. 8 goes into 9 one time. That gives me 1 left over. 8 goes into 16 two times. And then that's exactly 16. 8 goes into 0 times. So it's negative 120. So if you're not so good with your division with the house format, you can come see me during tutorials and we can practice that. There will be some times when you have to just divide it out by hand. Alright, 3 more. Doing good. Looking at the next one, we have negative 0.2y plus 0.3 equals negative 0.6. They all have one decimal place, so I'm going to multiply each one by 10. 10 and 10. That's going to give me negative 2y plus 3 equals negative 6. Subtract 3. That gives me negative 2y equals negative 9. Divide by negative 2. We have a negative divided by a negative, so we know the answer is going to be positive. 9 divided by 2, you might just know, is 4.5. If not, the 2 goes on the outside, the 9 goes on the inside. The decimal point is here. 2 goes into 9 4 times with 1 left over, and then you have to bring down a 0. 2 goes into 10 5 times. So again, if you have to divide it out, don't be afraid. It's not a big deal. Just work it out on your scratch paper and then pull it back into the problem. So it should be a positive 4.5. Alright, the next couple, if you want to try them on your own, pause the video and go ahead and give them a try. Here we have 4 equals 0.2c minus 2.6. One decimal point, one decimal place. So we're going to multiply by 10, every term by 10. That gives me 40 equals 2c minus 26. Trying to solve for c, so I'm going to add 26 to both sides. That gives me 66 equals 2c. Divide by 2, that's 33. So c equals 33. Not too bad. And the last but not least, we've got one decimal place, one decimal place. Everybody's going to multiply by 10. 6w minus 2 equals negative 5 times 10 is negative 50 plus 10w. So that works out to 6w minus 2 equals negative 50 plus 10w. Now it's up to you where you want to move things around. And it really, again, it's up to you when we've got constants and variables. It's up to you what to move first. My first move is to add 50 to both sides. I tend to move constants first. Not sure why. So that's my first move. From there, I'm going to move my 6w to the other side.